Yeah, if you look at the line on this game versus what it was last year, I think FSU was a 3-point dog, and it was pretty much a road game, and then it turns out to be a last possession game. But to James' point, if FSU takes care of the ball inside the 2-yard line, doesn't get fancy, they go in for a 2 touchdown lead there in the last couple minutes of the game. But as it turned out, obviously it comes down to an extra point. It's a 1-point game, but the only thing different this year is where both of these teams went into this game and these programs as being big question mark wild card kind of teams where people knew they had talent in spots, but how really good are these two teams coming off 6-7 and 5-7 the year before? It looks like a 1-point difference again, maybe, but it's they're both have elevated considerably in terms of what's expected. And shoot, Florida State might be a top 5 team in the country entering the season. They'll certainly be in the top 10. Not that we trust AP voters because they miss about half the teams in the top 25 by the end of the season. So I've never been sold on the AP vote, but it is what it is, and people look at it.
Yeah, this will be a better, and we got to be honest, this will be a better LSU team than Florida State faced last year, but it's also got to look at Florida State's side and the additions that they've added too, and it will be a better team. It's just going to depend on who coaches a better game and which players are have done enough film work and understand their assignments. And I think Florida State, just looking ahead early at it, we'll know more on the FSU side because we cover the team, and we'll get some word and some scoop here and there from LSU's camps. And, Brian Kelly, from what we learned last year, a little bit more tied in with some things, and some things will be told, some will not be told. But we know who their quarterback will be. We've got that answered already. But now seeing some of their younger players like Will Campbell, their tackle that was going against Jared Verse, he had a season under his belt now to have the experience, and he's going to be going against, though, a Jared Verse who is once again staying again and have another year to improve. There's different really fun storylines that we'll look into this throughout a couple months once we're past spring to start preparing for that Florida State versus LSU matchup, because like you said, Mark, this will be a top 10 matchup. It should be in college football to kick off the season, and one of the most attractive games to start off the year in college football. But there's so many just different things and intricacies between Florida State's team and LSU's that will be fun to cover. But a minus one favorite isn't too bad, a point favorite. So we'll see.
LSU's most accomplished wide receiver left for the NFL draft, Kayshon Boutte. Malik Neighbors was their returning leading receiver at 72 catches, 1,000 yards. He just got hit with a weapons charge, so we will see how that plays out over the offseason there.
Yeah, that one hurts, but he'll miss the first quarter of that FSU game.
Yeah, I would expect it to be pretty light,
if that.
Well, we'll see what else is involved. Yeah, it's a long ways away at this point. This didn't come up in August, so there's time to get things cleared up there one way or the other. The other point spread that came out was, of course, the trip to Death Valley as a 3-point dog. And of course, there's going to be a lot of football played, so that line's going to go all over the place. But if these two teams are what we expect them to be, that's basically a pick'em game, or if anything, it's a pick'em game at a neutral site, is what Vegas is telling us. So they're hopping on the Florida State bandwagon as well in terms of challenging Clemson, at least challenging Clemson, maybe being the ACC champion by that point spread.
Yeah, they are jumping on the FSU side, and I can understand it. Florida State's a brand that brings a lot of conversation, and that's because one part of being the fan base is very vocal, and we know that right off the bat, and been waiting for this turn for Florida State to be able to compete, and they've shown us that they've been able to do that with Clemson. They showed us 2 years ago when they went to Death Valley and battled there. I really liked the way that they went there, played. There was still things that Mike Norvell had to work on, and there was some mental mistakes that hurt them in that game that costed them. But Florida State now having these favorites, definitely if you're going to having the ACC championship opportunity and being favored to beat your, I don't call them rival, but they're practically your rival in the conference. Definitely, I think it creates a good conversation in the ACC now, where Florida State can battle with Clemson, and it's kind of been the other way around for now. Whenever you're like national outlets are talking about the conference, it's immediate Clemson, Clemson, Clemson. But now being able to add Florida State in here to have a conversation of being able to win the win the ACC is huge. It's a little bit different, something that we haven't been used to in a while, and it just goes to show what Florida State's been able to do developing wise. And I think too the biggest question mark from a lot of these reporters this offseason is going to go back to that 3-game losing streak, and if they can beat teams that are ranked, and that's fine, I think. But I think it's also important to look at the turnaround that Florida State did after those games and learning from them, and then also the attitude that these players brought, because they really think that they blew it on their end. You think, they looked back at tape, they looked back at their mistakes they made. They felt like they shouldn't have lost 3 of those games because they were close ones, but they really do think they made mistakes to cause that. It wasn't because of the opponent was better than them, and that's a mentality we haven't seen from a Florida State team in a while, and it's taken Mike Norvell a while to build that. But to have these early favorites is something interesting to me. But I'm more curious of how Mike Norvell is going to work the mentality of this team now having not really having the chip on your shoulder as much as you still kind of do, because you're expected to win the ACC, you're expected to make it to these New Year's Six Bowls, you're expected to now reach the playoffs. But I'm wondering how these players feel now that they've, I guess, made it. I guess getting those 10 wins. I'm just curious to see if that changes anything and their attitudes and how they play on the field with one another. But from what we've seen, though, internally, the future is bright, just I would say culture-wise in that regard.